So we are talking The Witcher Season 2. And let me just say right from the get-go, I didn't really get all that much from The Witcher Season 1. I scored it a 5 out of 10. And I am not familiar with the games and the books and the previous kind of Polish, Witcher TV show and things like that. I did buy the original Witcher 2 game when it came out on Xbox, but I never got round to playing it. So this kind of follows, obviously, Henry Cavill's character of The Witcher, Geralt, as he is protecting Ciri, who is this the chosen one ultimately, and he takes her to the kind of the home of the Witchers, where we meet a bunch of other ones, and then we also have various kind of other characters like Yennefer and the kind of the warring kind of nations of North and South and things like that. I won't go too much into the plot. I'm just going to tell you my thoughts on this season 2. One of the big, I think, uplifts, I would say, from the first season is they've got rid of the kind of the dual timelines, which was very, very confusing, and I think the writing was and still is relatively poor in this season, but when you had the kind of the two timelines, it made it particularly kind of confusing. Amusingly, they even reference it in this in season kind of 2, but it does make it a little bit more of the narrative flow a little better, I feel, in this particular season, because it is kind of all going in one direction, albeit we have a couple of kind of flashbacks kind of here and there. So that was all good, and I think I have to say, I think probably the first season, Yennefer was the standout character, and this season I would say it was Ciri. She certainly gets kind of the most limelight I think she's had up to this kind of point, and it is really the kind of the focal point of everyone's kind of like machinations and about kind of what they want. She tends to be the kind of the driving force here of whatever pretty much every faction in this series' goal pretty much relates to kind of Ciri in one way or another. And I think the character here, Freya Allan, does a good job and kind of steps up as a kind of a much more central character than the kind of the previous kind of season. I think this series actually improves. The second season improves as it goes along. I do think it started off pretty weak, but as we kind of get to the kind of the finale, I did find myself becoming a little bit more kind of invested in the kind of the series and its kind of characters and the plot of what is kind of going on. I think the production design here still looks, fab. There is some kind of nicely kind of designed fantasy elements here, and there is some kind of like some great kind of location shooting and stuff like that. And there's some interesting designs in regards to some of the creatures. What doesn't work for me? Okay. I have to say, and this is going to be somewhat controversial, I would suggest. To me, the biggest problem with this show is the character of the Witcher himself, Geralt, played by Henry Cavill, but he doesn't seem to have much to do with the actual story. I find that his kind of plot lines are only ever tangentially really kind of to do with the driving force of the story here, and I find he's much more of a supporting character in his own show, and until maybe with the exception of the finale, I find he really doesn't have a lot to do, and he's kind of just kind of off on the side doing his thing, whilst the story is happening around him with other characters. So I find that it's like, this really shouldn't be called The Witcher. It should be called just the world that this kind of series takes place in. And another issue I have, and this is kind of what I had with the first one, I think the decision here to have him this kind of like this badass, unemotional kind of like anti-hero who is just like brooding all the time makes for one boring character. I gotta say, he's just not an interesting character. He's kind of boring. And I know all the girls like him because he's hot and all of that, and that's great. But as a character, he's just dull, unfortunately. And I wouldn't say it's Henry Cavill's fault. It's just the way this character is written. Maybe it doesn't. And these were obviously books from some years ago, and that kind of stoic anti-hero maybe doesn't translate to kind of a screen as well as maybe it does on kind of the page. I don't know, it's at the games as well, that's what most people know it from. But to me, he didn't really seem all that interesting. And I also have some issues with some of the kind of like, the lore that this sets up. And again, I'll point out, I haven't read the book, so this may well have been addressed in the books and stuff. I can only go with what the show has shown us. But we're told that the witches are unemotional and distant, but they seem to be outside of the Henry Cavill character, every one of them just seems to be like regular kind of people to me. Plenty emotional there, be it belligerent or jovial. You know, they just seem kind of like, you know, warriors maybe, but they certainly don't seem like emotionless and stoic like the kind of the Henry Cavill character. They seem very different, very kind of just like regular kind of like, you know, medieval fantasy style archetypes. So to me, that kind of like that stoic persona that we have from our kind of our main Witcher seems out of place if that's what is meant to be like the rest of these kind of guys. I have to say, I think this season started off quite weakly. I think the first 2 episodes are pretty weak. It was just, when I first watched this season, I was like, oh God, it's just a struggle again. And, you know, I feel this series is its thing is to have these monsters always be kind of misunderstood. Now, they tend to be the more sort of standalone episodes, but I always thought in the first season, humans are the real monsters. It's like, okay, we get it. We don't need to have the same message over and over. These monsters are misunderstood, blah, blah, blah. And that's certainly true of the first episode, and it's kind of like, as the season goes on, it gets more of an overreaching point, but there's still that element there. And it's like, okay, we kind of are repeating this kind of point. And as I say, the first 2 episodes I think are quite weak. It does find its stride, I would say, a little bit in later episodes. But I still don't really feel like this series grips me like something like Game of Thrones, which is why this series was made, because Game of Thrones was such a big success. I mean, I just think about the world building here, and it's like these we have different kind of locations and different kind of like factions and kingdoms. And I never really feel like I know where any of these places are in conjunction to one another. I just don't get a good sense of the world. And, you know, I know the kind of, there's this north-south divide and everything, and, you know, the Nilfgaard are kind of allying all the elves and all of this, but I don't know. It just never really feels fleshed out to me. I feel this series just isn't, its world just isn't fleshed out enough. It's kind of mentions things and then kind of just moves on. And it has this kind of fakeness feel to it. So I've been that when we do have location shooting, I think it works quite well. But I feel when this series is shot on a set, it really feels like it's shot on a set. And then finally, again, some of the kind of the CGI monsters, they're not great, to be honest with you. Maybe with the exception of the final episode, which I feel they've saved a lot of the budget for. But until that point, I don't know. The CGI is maybe weak is the wrong word, but just not impressive. I just think it kind of looks like very CGI. And when this is meant to be your kind of Game of Thrones alternative, you know, successor series, it's not nearly as strong. I do think this is an improvement over the first season, although it does get off to a rocky start. But overall, I would say it's actually a better season, massively helped by not having, you know, 2 different timelines. But I still don't think this is a particularly great series, and it took me a while to get into this. But I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.